Judy Hoch, thank you so much for joining us here on the MJSA podcast. We wanted to talk a little bit today about mass finishing, and that is the topic of the feature article that's in the MJSA Journal magazine for October of 2022. And you are the author of the book on mass finishing for small shops. And so I've been interested to know how did you sort of get started to get interested in that topic? Was it a culmination of just you working on various techniques and things over time with your own work, and was it just a desire to find a better, cleaner way of doing things, or was it a combination? How did you get sort of into that?
Well, it isn't really either one of those. In my past life, I was an engineer in the computer business, a mechanical engineer. And so approaching the things I do in jewelry making and finishing and the way I do things is there's certainly artistry involved, but there's a great deal of science. And when I started making jewelry in 91, and that is a second career after I'd retired for the computer business.
Right.
I'm certifiably old. Anyway, I bought a really good vacuum system with, the buffs and the enclosures at the time that we had that were not as good as they are today.
Right.
And I found the process to be not necessarily repeatable. I tend to use a lot of texture in my jewelry. And as most jewelers will know, if you have texture on something, it takes just one extra swipe on a buff, and you're going to dull that texture. You're going to take off the highlights, and it didn't seem very professional.
Right.
And so I started doing some talking with some friends and came to the conclusion that, the big guys that make jewelry don't have people standing at these nasty buffs. And how do they do it?
Right.
And so I eventually made friends with somebody at Stuller, and I visited the Stuller finishing shop and saw what they were doing. I didn't have a proper tour, but I had a tour for maybe, 4 or 5 hours. And I could see what they were doing. And it totally changed my perspective on what you could do and the kinds of things that people were using. And at the time, what I saw at Stuller was a vibratory machine that was 6 feet across.
Right.
That kind of thing. And I said, there's got to be a way to do this stuff. Basically, I fell into it because it seemed like a better way to do things. And right. It served me well. I sold my work for about 15 years maybe 18 years on the road in juried art shows. I never did a farmer's market, but I did ACC and I did La Quinta, and I did the big shows across the country. And because I could finish fast and predictably, and I knew that when I made something and I threw it in the tumbler, it would come out usable.
Yeah, right.
So that's kind of the long answer on how I got into it. Is I wanted to run a one-woman shop. I had tried using subs, and some of the stuff I made, they'd make this lovely thing for me with malachite beads in it and throw out the pickle, trashed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
And so I just said, I may be only one of me, but I can use machines and make it look like there's more.
I was going to say that's one of the big benefits, obviously, that, you do have so much more control over that type of thing, and you're not reliant on, farming these things out as much. It makes sense, and it happened organically, which is nice. So you, in talking about, as I mentioned at the beginning of the book, which is called Tumble Finishing for Handmade Jewelry, Mass Finishing on a Small Scale. I understand that you're working on, or have been working on, a new edition of the book. And I'm wondering what prompted you to update that. Was it a case of significant changes in technology, or is it just you've been honing techniques and just wanted to kind of expand on what you had in the first edition, or what was the catalyst there?
Two things. The first time I published the book, I was pretty much sure you could finish everything with mass finishing and it would be just fine. Right. And it was kind of an obnoxious book in terms of telling you that, I can answer all your questions. Well, I can't. And I wanted to put some realistic expectations and understanding and limits on what you can do. And even people who do high jewelry, they can use mass finishing, but in a very different way. And to tone down some of the I know all the answers stuff that was in the book, it really required major rewriting. And in the middle of the whole thing, what's made it take so long is my husband was diagnosed with an incurable cancer. And so that kind of slows things down a little bit.
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
And he's doing well. As an aside, he's a vet, and the VA is doing stunning good work.
That's great.
So anyway, that's what the reason for the revision is, to get rid of some of this know-it-all. And secondly, to share a lot more techniques that I have learned, a lot more things that I think are usable to people and I can now describe productively.
But what can't you mass finish? What are the restrictions on, in terms of types of metal or stone? What in general do you feel like is the line there where you have to draw?
There's an absolute line. You never put stones in a tumbler.
Right.
Period. You use mass finishing prior to setting. I don't care how hard your stone is. You can crack a diamond just as easy as you can trash a piece of turquoise.
Right.
The mass finishing process, you're going to run an abrasive of some kind, or maybe even two kinds. If you're casting, you'll want a coarse abrasive, and then you'll want a fine abrasive after the coarse if you're casting. Or if you're doing fabrication, you'll just use a fine abrasive, and you'll run that anywhere from 3 to 8 hours. And it's something you have to learn with your work. And what that does is it will even out the surfaces. It won't take off texture, but it takes off the stuff that makes it not shine, makes it not look nice.
Okay, right.
We say that nicely. If you have sharp edges, like sharp corners, it will soften them. I think one of the ways I describe that the work in the abrasive part of tumbling is, when it comes out, it should feel soft in your hand. It shouldn't have sharp things. And when you run it long enough, anywhere from 3 to 8 or 10 hours, depending on what you got, it comes out, it still feels hard. It's still metal. You haven't rounded anything off, but it feels nice in your hands.
Right.
It's something you would feel nice putting on your body.
The learning process, obviously, is something that's going to take time for people who are maybe starting out and starting to work on this. What do you think jewelers can do to make, to kind of maximize their efforts and maximize their chance of success? Is it just a lot of repetitions at this point and experimentation?
I think if you've never been exposed to it, spend some time talking to somebody who uses it. I don't know any classes offered on it. I have taught in a number of places taught finishing, but it's one of those things that, it's kind of like watching paint dry. You teach people what to do, and then it takes a few hours to run.
To let it do it. Right.
Excuse me. If you find somebody who knows about mass finishing, and it can be the people who are selling machines, it can be somebody like me, and I've helped tons of people, and I'm happy to. Generally, looking at your work, I can tell you what you need and what to do. One of the places that kind of didn't exactly surprise me, but I hadn't thought about, the people who do anti-clastic work, like Michael Good, Nancy Lincoln, Jerry Scavazzi, those people that have the really intricate, shiny pieces that, trying to do those on a buff is crazy.
Yeah.
But if you do it in a proper mass finishing process, you can get bright, shiny, absolutely marvelous stuff. And after having shaped it, you're done.
Right.
And
those are good examples, yeah.
I've had more than one jeweler say I have saved their business because you can fix the finishing process, but it takes some time to learn how to do it or somebody to help you.
Right.
One of my frustrations with this is that the people who aren't really jewelers, they're crafty people who have some patterns that have been stamped out, and they bend them or saw them out and put them into stuff, and all their finishing is done in a rotary tumbler that's probably a mayonnaise jar. I mean, there's everything wrong with it, but it comes out sort of shiny, and they don't understand how to even look at a piece of jewelry and say, have we removed scratches? Have we done the things that need to be done to make this wearable? That frustrates me. And then they take and use something like some stuff called Hone and Highlight, which is intended for finishing steel, and they put it in a rotary tumbler, and it takes off the extra patina they put on. It makes it look like bad pewter, and it's frustrating. But they don't know, they don't want to spend the money for another $100 tumbler. Well, Travis, I think the things that you asked about, things that you can mass finish productively, and one of them is parts. In other words, if you're making a bracelet that has stones all the way around it and is a construction of many, many pieces, you've probably cast those pieces. Well, rather than put them all together and then try and finish it on a buff, why don't you take and put them in a tumbler and get them cleaned up and get them pretty close to being done, and save you all the detailed time of trying to do that? The mass finishing parts is a really good idea when you're doing complicated pieces of jewelry. The things that you can't productively finish, I don't think there's an answer to that. I think you can productively finish anything, but it's a combination of what media are you using, what kind of machines are you using. And when we did the article for MJSA, we talked primarily about rotary and vibratory tumblers. There's magnetic pin finishers. There's the disc finishers, and there's like 6 other kinds, and they're all specific to a particular kind of need. There's also people working in steel and jewelry, and that requires, you can use tumbling and you can use media, but you have to use a liquid that inhibits rust. And so, it all is matching up the kind of work you're doing and what kind of finish you want. And I think it's a balance of, what are you going to sell this for? Mm-hmm. Does it have to be perfect? Does it have to be pretty good? And how much are you willing to spend in time and money to do that? And you can answer all of them, but it takes a bit of time, and sometimes it's frustrating.
Hopefully, and like so much, yeah.
Hopefully new book will help a bit with how to sort that out.
Certainly. When is the expected completion date for that at this point?
I don't know. I got a good report from my husband's oncologist yesterday.
Good. Great. That's great.
So I'm back working on it.
It's in the works. Well, we're very happy to hear it and very happy to have you on today. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. We appreciate it.
It's an honor, and thank you, Travis.